From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Car at Night Show, inviting to join Nolan as he looks back on 2 years of the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for a true special edition of the podcast with take two of this type of recording. And I know what you're thinking. No, what do you mean special edition? No, what do you mean take two? Well, as of this recording, we're a few days away, I believe 2 days away from the 2 year anniversary of the podcast being another episode with Scott Dunn as our guest that I interview. And the intention of this recording, I'm doing another recording that I've posted after this part two, was to have done it over the last 2 out of 3 weeks so I can build up to this episode. But of course, in typical Nolan fashion, I did not do that. But I say take two also because I wanted to do a version of this after doing one, thinking it was okay, and then taking it down because I wanted to do something that didn't offend anybody and give people the idea that something was the case when it actually wasn't true at all. But before I go any further with any pomp and circumstance, we'll take a quick break and then we'll return. And thank you for staying with us as we continue the festivities on the podcast here on YouTube or on the audio platforms. You know, as I was playing this out a few weeks ago, but really further in advance, I guess you could say, I wanted to do something that was very special for the show because there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this and putting this all together over the last 2 years. And I thought there was something that was, that best represented what it was like to do this in an honest but also not biased perspective that people could understand what it's been like for me to do this podcast. And also something that wasn't further staying from the truth. Anyways, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And without further ado, let us begin. The point of this whole description and recollection of the journey I've been on for the podcast is not to come off as some arrogant asshole type of person where I'm saying, oh, I'm better than people who came before me, after me, and during my time as a podcaster. Certainly don't want to say that. And if that's how it's perceived, I apologize, but that's sort of your fault for thinking that way because it's certainly not how I want to come off as. But I will say this, in order to make it 2 years like myself, you have to have some level of confidence. Certainly don't want to have an overabundance of confidence because you have to be able to back it up. And sometimes I haven't been able to back it up. But you have to have confidence in thinking your product is the best because that helps you motivate to keep going and try to reach higher for the stars. But the thing is that, overnight doing this, although it wasn't really overnight, it was over, of course, a span of a few weeks or months. There are some things I knew overnight, which was how it was going to look, what the name was going to be, the structure, and so forth, compared to other things such as editing software, equipment, and how I would talk to the guests to get them on, which I will talk about later on. But there are certain things I knew overnight that would help me speed through the process of this. And whether it be during the beginning stages talking to just friends or then having more well-known people on, having that already in the back and knowing about it makes it an easier process to look at least somewhat more professionalism than you already had. And that's sort of where I want to go next. To be honest with you, I don't really know why I thought to do a podcast and why that was the best situation for me, because although I really had tried to do one beforehand years ago with no real success, I thought, why do this? But I realized this. I realized because it would have given me, or it gives me, a challenge in life, similar to starting a new instrument or instrument in the beginning, a new other skill, a sport, or something of that nature, a new hobby gives you a challenge in life. It makes you look to get up in the morning and try again at that topic or whatever it may be. And that was the case with myself. And I think once you're able to go for that goal and that situation and you're able to somewhat master it, I'm nowhere near mastering a podcast, it gives you a sense of relief in what you are trying to do next in life in general. What I know what was for certain, though, was that I'd watched or listened to a fine amount of podcasts that at least gave me some idea of how one should be operated and structured. What I knew what was for certain as well, though, was that I could not have my podcast be anything similar to what's left at Barstool Sports or any other niche-oriented programs there, where they're just shooting the shit about stuff such as fantasy football or golf or baseball, things of that nature. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong. That's your job. That's great. I can't do that. I can't have two or three friends on as co-hosts and we're talking about why Cordell Patterson, Michael Carter of the Jets are screwing me over each week of fantasy football. I can't do that. I have no passion. Thus, why I decided to do an interview based slash driven podcast because I had watched or listened to enough where it seemed as though people were asking questions, baseline questions, that showed that they might not have done exactly the correct amount of research to have those people on, because those guests who are on people's podcasts, they don't have to do it; they have better things to do, and you want to be worth their while. You don't want them to be regretting coming on. And if you just ask the greatest hits type of questions, it's not interesting for someone else tuning in to maybe have those guests on. And that being said, I sort of pride myself on, not to brag or say how I'm better than someone, but I pride myself on my research in the sense of I try to watch as many interviews that they've done visually, read as many articles that they've done of interviews, uh, written, I guess, wise, and take every bit of information down, thus creating questions that they might not have been asked before, or that they might have been asked before, but in a different perspective or different way that gives them another answer that may be more well thought out, thus creating a more professional atmosphere once you have those big guests on. Because those early guests I had on as friends, people like Bob Bruce Perry, Ryan Sweet, Nick Ambrosia, Jeff Alves, Dylan Bracken, Ashton Grennan, Trevor Dalton, Michael San Giuliano, Brennan Doherty, Ryan Sweet, all those people I had on, those people prepared me later on for these big guests on that helped me realize, okay, I had these interviews with friends on. I left about 20 minutes of dead space in there, or whatever, maybe 5 minutes, whatever it was, of saying, oh, well, what do you want to discuss next? Do you think there's anything else we need to discuss? And oh, no, I think we covered it. That makes you realize, okay, I need to do a better job with my research. Thus, the reason why I spent, but also continue to spend a hell of a lot of time with my research and making it seem like I know what I'm talking about. Because no one in life knows everything. But if you at least try to make it seem like that, then you're in a better situation than what you were before. But before I continue and have an aneurysm or have my adrenaline burst up through the roof of my mother's house, we're going to take another quick break before we return. During that quick break I had of a few seconds, I sort of was reflecting upon this over the last 2 years, which was this. Whether it's someone like a weekend meteorologist, Tony Award winning actor, author, musician, coach, athlete, whatever it was, everyone who I've had on as a guest, whether a friend or a more well known person, deserves the same amount of quality in both effort and energy when preparing for that interview. When you have someone who's uber successful in their career, a an athlete or an actor, whoever it may be, such as David Lee, Phil Bordwell, Michael Andreas, Richie Canada, and Jeff Battle, they all compliment you like that. It really takes the cake for an amateur such as myself to keep pushing forward, to keep trying to do better than they did the previous week, which is always a challenge to do, but you keep trying to push forward with that motivation that you're given because you want to do that. You want to try to improve so analytically it can be better. So you can, instead of going from 15 or 17 or 20 views, then 30 or 40, 50, 100 or over 500 like I had with Mark Lynette over the summer of 2022. Yeah, this past June. But you want to do it so you can reach that milestone or then even do better. Okay, let's try to get 600 or 700 or 800 or 1,000 or 2,000, whatever it may be. When you have people like David Leaf, Michael Andreas, Philip Bardwell, Richie Canada, and Jeff Battle and so forth, when they have people like that comment and say nice things to you as an amateur, it is a very nice thing to keep you motivated to keep going forward. Like I said earlier, though, before we can get to these well-known guests, and I've been blessed and fortunate, very fortunate to have a lot of them on, you have to start somewhere. And whether you're fortunate enough or not to have a large financial purse for your podcast, or you have a lot of social clout to start your podcast out quickly, you have to start somewhere. And that's usually from a humble spot being the very bottom and beginning of it. And it can't just happen overnight. I say that in another comical sense because I knew that I wouldn't be able to start out hot right away. Because if I did, then you'd be scrambling to figure out, okay, who's next? Who are you going to have on next that's just as good, if not even higher up, better, whatever you want to say. And eventually, if you were going to go like that, you have to look for that. And it's hard to do that on a consistent weekly basis, like I have done. Then you then say, okay, I have burnt out. I don't want to do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. I'm too busy. You say those things because you're not able to continue on that pace. Thus, you have to start at the beginning. And that really helped me out in several different ways. And boy, did I learn the cringe way. By cringe, I mean this in a comical way. And this is sort of paraphrasing it. But I remember the very first episode I did with Rob Bruce Perry, who I believe came on 5 times, one of the most whoever came on at the beginning, especially, is that during the episode, which was about 25 to 30 minutes, I ended it with saying, and as I said, paraphrasing, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Or is there anything else we should discuss? And he said, No, I think we covered practically everything we could. We talked about this, that, and the other. And that, looking back on it, is a prime example of not putting enough research in and putting the most amount of research you can to create a fluid conversation from the first second to the last second. Because now I try to end it with saying, thanks again. That's sort of that, whatever maybe I can end it better. I put enough energy into my research to make it more fluid and complete, so that it's not looking back saying, or during the interview process or editing process, say, oh, that was, why did it end like that? It's sort of weird and uncomfortable. And sure, you still have those moments now where there's peaks and valleys, of course, like anything else in life. But those were a lot of moments where I had to take a lot of punches in the gut and realize, okay, I'm really raw and new at this, and I'm only going to go upwards if I try my best to improve consistently each week. Eventually, through trial and error, I learned how to put together a better episode, both editorially speaking, but also notes wise and putting time and effort in before the episode was recording. And I sort of realized this sort of structure, and it's sort of a subconscious thing that happens where you have something, okay, if I have a page and a half, a page of notes, that's 20 to 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. If you have a page and a half to 2 pages, that's maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes about. If you have more than that, you have two plus, maybe 4 pages notes. Okay, that's 45 minutes to maybe an hour and 15 hour and 20 minutes worth of an interview. And of course, you cut stuff out that you don't like, which is in anything else in life, like a podcast. But you sort of have that structure. So you say, okay, I'm putting this amount of time into researching, putting together my notes, questioning and stuff. That is the structure you get. So eventually it seems more professional over time. Then after the 30 or so friends I had on, some that repeated multiple times, of course, which nothing wrong with that. But after I did that process, I realized, okay, now at least have some sort of version of professionalism. I'm doing this to have people on, whether it's just Stone Freeman, Tyler Cruz, Anthony McCarry, Thorbjorn, Kevin Sutton, people of that nature. You at least look some sort of professional, and you can tell, or you can at least show, at least to some degree, that okay, you know what you're doing. And that's sort of what I did, because at least I have a better interview each week, but B, the longer and more complete of an interview it looks like at the end of the day. To make a long story short, eventually I got the Stones encouraged to have some well known people on, and then eventually get more well known people on, and then bigger people on, even more well known people on. And that's sort of the process I got to then help me with this and to make me feel comfortable. And I believe, no, I know from about July 6th, no, I shouldn't say about, but I know from July 16th of 2021 on, when I had Tyler Cruz on, my first sort of well known celebrity or person on, I knew that the process I was about to be going on to get well known people on, quote unquote, celebrities on my podcast, that it was going to be worth it. And boy, let me tell you, it was worth it. But before I begin, we're going to take another quick break, and then when we return, I'll share some of my final thoughts. At the beginning of this recording and during this small hoopla of happiness as well, a point of reiteration is that if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would still be doing this podcast, 2 years later, as I just said, with possibly even more excitement and energy, I would have thought you were joking. Because I'll tell you this again, what this podcast has taught me, and hopefully it's taught others as well, that if there's something that you're passionate about, you have interest or excitement towards, whether it's deep down and buried or publicly visible, that go for it, because this podcast is total proof of the pie that I had interest, excitement, passion, and excitement to do this, and I ended up doing it to a certain extent. And I truly believe that. Because, and I'll say this, whether they're close friends, renowned musicians, coaches, entertainers, each of them has brought an occasion to myself of insurmountable joy and amount of pride that I cannot explain or experience with anything else. Truthfully, as I say that to you all, with any sort of words or phrases, and to be part of this journey and be part of this world at this time with the guests I've had on, it's something it's indescribable as well, and sort of head scratching as well, because you sort of say, the hell did I get them on? Because they certainly have well more important things to do and higher importance of things to accomplish in their life instead of coming on this podcast. And I say that confidently because, as I've said, this isn't some big operation such as Joe Rogan's or YMH or something of that nature. So for them to come on, it means a big deal to me, and I'm truly, truly honored for that reason. So, to be able to have done this podcast, to continue to be able to do this podcast, the Whole Current Nature, over the last 2 years, has been nothing short of a huge privilege and an honor for me in every way possible. I truthfully say that because even though there are many ups and downs, analytically, not being able to get guests, whatever the situation may be, or the mindset that I have and I haven't had throughout this process, I have never at one point wanted to ever quit or pause doing this for a period of time. And I truthfully, honestly say that, and to God, I mean that because there's nothing like this. And at the end of the day, like anything else, it's going to end, of course. But this train is going to keep on running, and I'm not anywhere, thankfully, nowhere near that stage. So with that, I will say this. To everyone who's played a role in this podcast, thank you so much. Whoever you are, wherever you are, without you, this wouldn't be possible. To everyone near and far who's consistently, inconsistently watched or listened to an episode, thank you for being a supporter and fan of the podcast. Without an audience such as yourself, this would be possible because I'd just be talking to myself, and that would be weird and uncomfortable, to be honest with you. I just hope to be able to crack the code with you and have you interested in what I'm talking about, with whom I'm talking to, and that one day it becomes as successful as others do, not just locally or in my state, but nationally, internationally as well. To something that's more important, gratitude. To everyone who's been on this ride with me, who's played a role in this podcast, I thank you so much. Without you, of course, this wouldn't be possible. To everyone near and far who's consistently and inconsistently tuned into the podcast, whether on YouTube or on the audio platforms that you may have or be able to have, I thank you so much. I just hope that I provide something of interest and enjoyment and love that I have had that you can also have. And hopefully, I'd be able to crack the code for your own interest to eventually not just have you guys around me enjoy it, but those in my state, but also nationally, internationally enjoy it as well. Now to the more impactful and more serious and special gratitudinous sayings I can do. To my dear father, who has tuned into every week since he started tuning in and has left a like and commented on the episode, each episode he's tuned into. Thank you so much, Papyrus Pride. It truly means a great deal that you're such a big supporter of this. And to my mother, who has been a big supporter, who is not afraid to give her opinion or thoughts on an episode, who's watched or listened to specifically on a podcast each week, and who's occasionally shared an episode from time to time on Facebook. I truly appreciate it as well. Thank you so much. To my dear family in the grand city of Warwick, I thank you so much for having so much enthusiasm and zest for me doing this, and looking forward to who I have on each week and to asking who's next and who I should have on next. It truly makes me keep wanting to do this for those who not just are my immediate family members, but those else that I am lucky and fortunate to share blood with as well. And to all my guests I've had on since the beginning, such as Michael Sangiuliano, Drew Pizzulo, Robert Bruce Perry, Ryan Sweet, Jeff Alves, Nick Ambrosia, Trevor Dalton, Ashton Grennan, and so on and so forth. Brennan Doherty, thank you so much for helping me out in the beginning. I can't even express the gratitude I have for you making me feel happy and a part of your life, but also being a part of my life. And I hope you realize that as well. To all the amazing, legendary personalities I have, and I'll read these off, that have walked into my life via this podcast, such as David Leaf, Michael Andreas, Richie Canada, Dan Janik, Frank Orpano, Tommy Garrick, Morgan Cena, Chris Farmer, Carly Munoz, Robert Finaro, Andrew Burnett, and several more. Not just your stories, but your life that you've lived have been something mere mortals like myself only dream of having. So to give some random and scrawny blonde-haired kid like myself the opportunity and time and availability for any length of time, the option to share it, talk about it, and interview about it has been a real trip and gift I'll have that I'll never be able to pay, although I'll hopefully try soon. Whether you're a guest, a viewer, a listener, or a supporter from a distance, without you, we wouldn't be able to be where we are today without you. Without supporters, fans, and guests like you all, there wouldn't be a show like this. So again, thank you so much, sincerely. In the words of Dennis Wilson, thank you, thank you, thank you. There's one thing I can ever guarantee you in life is this. Although this may seem like the end, that is certainly anything further from the truth. For I have a strong fire, passion, desire burning within me to continue doing this at any length of speed and consistency. And I say that because there's tons, dozens upon dozens, hundreds of more stories I am looking forward to sharing with you all out there, whether you've seen it before or not. But also because there are a bunch of more episodes that are waiting to be released. They're on the chopping block, so I can't end anyways. So until further notice, this podcast, like a bullet train from LA to DC, is going to keep going until I'm the last one left tuning in and talking. With that being said, how about I just leave you with this? Here's 2 years of joy and happiness. Here's to 2 more years of joy and happiness. Thank you. And I bid you all a truly heartfelt good night.